Hey gang, welcome to Ozone Late Night. This is part 2 of my conversation with Jason Howell, host and producer over at twit.tv. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the second installment of the Ozone Late Night, where I am joined by Jason Howell, the host and producer over on the Twit Network. You can find Jason as well as the other wonderful members of the Twit crew by going to twit.tv. Jason, welcome back for part 2.
Hello. It feels like just yesterday.
Yes, we always pretend, don't we? It's been a week. What has happened in a week? It hasn't been a week, everybody.
So much has happened. My goodness, the world is completely different a week later.
Yes, it certainly. I mean, listen, it could have changed in the 45 minutes or so that we've been talking. That's the way it is now. But yes, it hasn't actually been a week. I will cast aside the veil, and I won't lie to you, folks. It was about 5 minutes ago that we stopped the last part.
I mean, it was so long ago that they referred to it as Twitter and not X. So.
Oh boy. I know there are people who are sick of hearing about large language models and AI, but I feel like those topics have benefited so much from Elon Musk's stewardship, if you want to use that term, for control, whatever's going on at whatever company it is.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You know what?
It's unfortunate.
I miss what Twitter was. I think that's probably a lot of people say the same thing, but
I do too.
I avoided so much of social and just stuck with Twitter, really. And now it's like, that's crumbling. So
I mean, I guess that's the risk you take, because I did largely the same thing. I mean, Twitter was definitely, and still is, X is the place. God, I can't do it. I can't bring myself to do it.
I refuse to call it X. It's just so dumb. I can't do it. I can't do it.
I know, but eventually it's just going to be the name. Anyways, that's where, my largest kind of social media following, as it were, is. And so, I kind of really focused on it and didn't do much on the other social networks, not nearly as much anyways. And so, yeah, I mean, I miss the kind of broader community kind of conversation that I feel like I used to get out of Twitter. Things are a lot quieter there now. Plus, I also just kind of like, don't feel great when I'm using it just because of the Elon, even though some people are like, well, get over it, whatever. People, businesses change and I don't know. It's a hard one. It's a hard one because Twitter was what it was for so long, and so immediately it changed into something completely different. And it's hard to see why it's changing, other than the fact that someone with a lot of money decided, hey, if I got to buy this thing, I might as well just completely turn it upside down. And I don't know. It just feels like wasted to me.
No, I completely agree, because and kind of similar to what I had said in the first segment, there was a lot of bad stuff on Twitter. There was a lot of harassment. There was clearly a failure in moderating at the speed at which it had to happen. I'm not going to tell anybody, although every social network has these problems. I'm certainly not contesting that there were people who don't look like me had a much harder time on there. So I'm absolutely aware, and I'm not denying that whatsoever. But it was referred to as, a cesspool and everything before Musk bought it. And I don't agree with that. I think that, yes, there were terrible things and there were improvements to be made. But anybody who thought it was bad prior has to be reassessing at this point. And the argument of, well, businesses change. Okay, but man, that's not a great world to live in, where people can just destroy something that does provide a lot of value to people and community and benefit just on a whim. I guess I don't know, maybe I just am idealistic that way and a hippy dippy or whatever, but that bothers me that that's such an accepted thing, I guess.
I mean, if you've got enough money to buy a company, you can literally do anything you want with a company, and that's what Elon Musk is proving. You know, he had the money, or rather, maybe he didn't have the money, but he was able to somehow collect the money somehow, because who the F is giving this dude money to buy Twitter, especially now? I wonder how they're feeling about that, but. You know, I mean, I suppose that's just how the world works, right? Like anything that's out there can be bought, probably. And once it is, I mean, nothing lasts forever, I guess,
That's
is
true.
the cheery message that I have for everyone right now. And Twitter is kind of the result of that. I will say though, it's forced me, or rather, I have kind of, you know, found myself in a position where I am sampling and doing different things on different social media platforms and everything. Whereas I was kind of settled on Twitter, which on one hand was kind of nice, but on another hand, you know, kind of, I don't know. I don't want to call it lazy, because no one should feel like they have to update any social media. You know, I've certainly been there where I'm like, you know what? Like, I think I'm over social media. Like, I don't need to spend my time talking about how I spend my time. Like, you know what I mean? Like crafting the perfect tweet. How many times have I opened up an app and punched out a long thing only to like stare at it for 10 seconds and then delete it and be like, all right. Like, I don't know if my posting this is worth what happens when I do. And so I'm just going to accept that I needed to write it, and then I will delete it and pretend like I posted it and move on. And as a result, you know, I got very silent on social media because it just didn't seem worth it.
Well, yeah, and kind of what you were saying was that the one thing that is beneficial is that there are now other. I mean, I'm not necessarily.
Yeah, thank you. You got back on my track.
Well, no, but I agree, because what I ended up doing with Twitter, and actually I felt like this was a better use of it for me, because I just never felt like I had all that much to say anyway. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what I had for breakfast and dinner every night of the week. But I like the idea of, I would go on there, find other illustrators, and I would boost them as much as I could. Say, oh, this is great work. You should look at this. That was what I felt like Twitter was actually really good for, was not necessarily me broadcasting what I had to say, because I didn't have much to say, but trying to, as much as possible, highlight others who, you know, may not have had the big names and might get 3 or 4 people to follow them and maybe buy their work. So that was something that I feel like, yeah, Twitter is now, because there are people who are like, well, I made what name I have on Twitter. I was never on these other ones. What am I supposed to do now? I really feel bad for them, because I don't think anybody should have to have 16 social media accounts and constantly put the same content on all the time to get traction. I mean, that's,
oh my God, it's exhausting.
That's another form of misery, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, it totally is. It totally is. And it's just, you know, again, it's untenable. What it makes me feel like when I find myself in that position, I'm like, you know, checking 5-6 apps and like, oh, I got a post over here. I got a post over here. It makes me feel like I need an assistant, and I don't. Like, I do not need an assistant to update my social media. No one does. I suppose if you're a business and, you know, it's a marketing arm, I suppose then, or I guess celebrities probably do that. But my point is not that like my words are so valuable I need an assistant to put it out there. It's just that the ecosystem around social is so convoluted and like broken from each other that it kind of requires like a part-time job just to like manage it and craft things and put them out and get the video or cut together your TikTok to put it, you know, like, it's exhausting. Like, when do you find time for anything else if you're busy updating all of your socials?
Right. And the thing I'm curious about, and I don't know where it's going to end up, because I'm not no kind of fortune teller or anything like that, but right now it feels like social media has fractured into niche environments. So, you know, there's a certain, well, I guess most people are on Threads because it's the most easily accessible via Facebook and Instagram. So it's kind of all ecosystem together. Then you've got Mastodon, which feels like it has become a lot of technology people and journalist types, you know, because I'm kind of on a lot of things now, which is, oh God, what am I doing with my phone? And then I'm on Blue Sky as well, which is kind of like the rubber room, romper room of weirdos, which is actually the one I like the best because it's just all psychos, and that's great. I'm there for the weirdos, and that's
God, I've
that's
spent the least amount of time with Blue Sky.
It is really. I've said this many times, and it still holds true. It is artists, weirdos, perverts, and sex workers. That's the core 4 group on there, and that's fine with me because it's a very varied and diverse group of people with a lot, like Stacey Higginbotham is on there, Brianna Wu is on there. So there's all these really interesting people from all over the place, and they're right next to like Chris Cooper, the artist known as Coop, who draws all kinds of like devil women and stuff like that. And I've followed him for years. So it's this big, what feels like early Twitter when it wasn't mainstreamed, I guess. And so it has a niche to it. And there's a lot of people who just won't even touch it. The same way, it's kind of like,
well, it's still invites, right?
Yeah, it's still invite only, which is, part of the reason. And I think that's not going to be sustainable for much longer. If they want to last, it's going to have to go away.
Yeah.
So yes, that is also part of it. And that's what I mean about the other side of it is, okay, if it opens up, does it now become nothing?
Right.
Because will it just be Twitter again? And that's
does it vanillify?
Well, that's the thing is the future of social actually niche social, where you go to the groups. I mean, there's a negativity, there's a downside of that, which is the echo chamber problem. If you're only where everybody's saying what you agree with, oh, well, guess what that leads to? Not great stuff. We know that's bad. But at the same time, if it is a huge, basically rock concert where everything's turned up so loud all you're hearing is the static of your tinnitus kicking in, is that beneficial? I don't know which is better or worse. And I don't know what it's going to end up with, but I don't know if we're going to ever get back to something like Twitter or Facebook where it's literally just a stream of everything and you can just kind of wade in and wade out. Yeah. I don't know. It's I don't know where we're going. It feels different, but it feels like everybody's trying to recreate what was already there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Threads, has felt very much like, oh, let's try and do Twitter again. And like, came out screaming with its release, anchored in no small part by the Instagram kind of, your Instagram followers and everything. And I don't know, like I'd be curious to know if engagement and all those other, silly metrics are, if those numbers are going down on Threads, because I think what I realized time and time again is new thing announced. Everybody wants on new thing. Everybody tries new thing and says new thing is amazing. Everybody kind of comes back down to earth and realizes they use new thing less than they thought they were going to, and then there's a new thing. That seems to be the wash, rinse, repeat that we're in right now. It's like, okay, but I'm not going to keep installing these damn things on my phone. Like, have a folder filled with these icons, and I can't check them all, nor do I want to. I will say that I probably like 6 weeks ago or so opened up TikTok, and I was like, what would it be like? Not that this was like some brilliant discovery, because this is probably how like millions of people use TikTok, but I was like, what would it be like in my life if I used TikTok like I used to use Twitter? Like, what if it was just like, because sometimes the thing that gets me down on social media is like, I've got this idea of something I want to put in there, but now I have to like use a stupid touchpad keyboard and misspell things a million times and punch it out, and then I have to copy edit, and I have to like craft it and make sure that it's great, because if I get a word wrong, I'm going to hear from a bunch of people that are razzing me for that, or whatever the case may be. And so it feels like I need to spend this time with the content that I just don't want to spend. And I was like, well, what if I just like hit record and I say the thing and I do my very best to care a whole lot less about how I look and what I sound like and blah, 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 and just send it out and be stupid or be goofy or whatever, and just like move on with my life. So I've been trying that, and I can't say that like I have amazing top tier TikTok content. Wow, that was a lot of alliteration. But I will say like it's kind of enjoyable to just like not care that much. So
that's my whole show. I know what you mean. No, I agree. And that's where, because I was thinking about, there's a similarity to me, and this is what I wonder if we're in the middle of now with the disintegration of Twitter and kind of this isn't new, but the idea that Facebook has kind of become a older generation thing at this point, where it's not something that the kids really, they're younger
For
people, I should say.
sure. Yeah, it's parents. And yeah.
And I was thinking about to go into your other avenue of interest, which was Android, and the fact that a lot of people have said for a long time that cell phones are stale and they're boring and everything else, and that Android, that there's no difference and things like that, which in broad strokes is true. I mean, at this point, cell phones are, what they're going to do, and we have an understanding of how they function. But that led to people playing around with flip phones. That led to, okay, well, there's or the nothing phone, which is, it's still a slab phone, but it's trying to jazz up another aspect of it. It's trying to do something that differentiates it. And I wonder if that's what's kind of going on with Threads and Blue Sky and Mastodon and everything else, because even though they all in many ways feel like they are trying to recreate Twitter, and that's because Twitter is just a feed. It's just a vertical or what, a chronological or whatever. It's just a feed of content. So it's a news ticker, except it's vertical instead of horizontal. It's not like that's something new really either. But I wonder if all of the turbulence and the crowds going to different places will end up generating something, like you said, with TikTok or something else, where there will be a different version of what social media is considered, because that is commoditized, right? I mean, it's Facebook and Twitter and to some degree Instagram. Yeah. Those are the things that most people, when you say, well, what is social media? That's what they're going to think of. Facebook, Instagram, or, younger people, TikTok. But this idea of a scrolling feed. And I don't know that that's necessarily always going to be the case. So is some of this turbulence going to lead to something else? I don't know, but I wonder if there is a benefit to this kind of fracturing and people trying to figure it out. Yeah, because otherwise it does become stagnant and stale and boring, and then nobody cares. Yeah. So I don't know that I'd call what Musk did creative destruction. I don't think there was that much direction in it. That's attributing, I think, too much intent and intelligence to what's going on. But it may be a side effect of that leads to here's another overused word, innovation in what people consider social media to be. I don't know. Yeah. I could be completely wrong. What do I know? But I guess I could be optimistic that way, because I look at flip phones and I have zero interest. Zero. I don't care. I do not want to fold my phone. But I'm thrilled that people who want that suddenly have it. There's people who adore those things. That's great. That's fantastic that market is now served. Doesn't interest me. I'm fine with a boring slab. But maybe this will be the same type of thing, that there will be some new form of how we share things. Maybe we're due for a change in the way that we interact and communicate with each other. Maybe this will lead to it.
I mean, yeah, I would be really curious to know what the next thing, that it leads to is, which, I mean, I guess if we knew that, then we could be rich. Let's get rich.
I'm sorry. That wasn't really a question. That was
no. I know. I'm thinking about it. And I do think that, where we are right now is kind of a little bit of an inflection point where we're realizing, okay, what we've had, doesn't work for a certain number of reasons, be it safety and privacy and megalomaniacs and, all this other stuff. But what we're replacing it with is something that's very similar. And I think we're doing that because that's comfortable and change is hard. And I don't know that we're necessarily at a point right now where we're willing to be like, okay, this had a whole lot of issues with it. That's a reason why we are where we are right now. What's next? I don't know what that next point is, but yeah, and I don't know where I'm going with that. I think for a while now with social media, I've been a little kind of like the glitz is gone for me with social media, and sometimes I'm using it because I feel like I have to. Like sometimes I have guilt. Like I'm a very, my job, I'm a public person. Like I'm a public persona. I'm on these podcasts and people tell me that they enjoy kind of knowing what I'm up to and everything. So there's a part of me that feels like I need to be sharing some aspect of my life because it's kind of part of my job. And so my not sharing, it has less to do with not wanting to share my life with people, because I'm happy to come on a podcast and talk all about it. It's just more like the process, the flow of how we do that and what we actually get out of it. It's just kind of, it used to be really exciting. And now it's not. Now it's just like, I got to do that. I got to open up that app and punch out that thing in order to let everybody know. And I don't know. I do think that it's ripe for reinvention of some form, but I just don't feel like we're near that yet.
No,
I think people still
think,
want to share.
Yeah,
they really want to share.
Well, it's like you said. It's people are using these things as they've always used them because that was the way that you used it, and there has to be some type of shift in that, and maybe it is something like TikTok, which is obviously extraordinarily popular, and a lot of people like it. And so, is it something? I don't know. This is purely just kind of me thinking out of the side of my head without any real actual endpoint, but I'm trying to conjure some type of optimism about all this because I don't think just as people is like, oh yeah, it's the death of social media and good, it's overdue, and I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's necessarily
I don't agree with that either.
Yeah, because I have talked to people and like my artwork has connected with people in really wild ways that I never would have anticipated. And they weren't because I'm out there and I'm a really social person, because I'm not. And I can't travel the globe. I don't have that kind of money, nor a private jet, nor would I want to, because I'm terrified of flying. So my avenue to that type of stuff is these outlets. And so there isn't no value to them.
For sure.
So it will be, so that's what I mean.
For that stuff.
Yeah, sure. It can be. It can be good and it can be awful, like everything. Speaking of which, segue. See that? That's a segue. I rarely do it very effectively.
You know what
Let's
you're doing.
move into your newest show, your AI show, because one thing that's always interesting to me. Now, I'm going to see if I got this right, based on how I've heard you talk about it and how the stories you've covered and the things you've said about it. It feels like you are kind of. Well, actually, you know what? Instead of me interpreting, as a creator, since you are a musician, somebody who crafts original creative output that you do, how do you look at everything around AI? And because there's really kind of the two camps. It's the future, and it's going to destroy everything. And not destroy everything like Skynet. I know everybody jumps that, but I mean, a lot of people in creative industries are very concerned, terrified, angry about the fact that they feel like this is a vacuum that will take what is unique about what they do, suck it up, and just spit it out for somebody else to use, with them being left in the dust.
Yeah.
So as a creator, and then there's people on the other side who say, no, it lets you make anything you want. That's the power of it. Your imagination is unleashed. You don't need to know how to draw or how to play a guitar or anything. You can just tell this system what you're trying to get to and refine it, and then you end up with something that you would never have been able to do on your own because you lack that innate talent. And that's the positive side of it. So as a creator, I'm curious where you come down on that. Not necessarily on one side or another, but how you view that from where you are, because you're, again, at kind of an intersection of, you have the technology background and you're a creator.
Yeah. I can understand the panic. I can understand that if you are in a position or in life where you have a very specific skill and a technology comes along and lowers the bar of entry for that skill, which is not to say that it replaces the quality of that person, right? If you're an artist or if you're a musician or whatever, I don't know that AI automatically creates better art or creates better music than you do as a professional musician or a professional artist. I mean, it creates different art. But I have a hard time believing that the value of human art or human capability just goes away when there is an electronic, electronic kind of also, I don't know what the word is, but kind of a representation of that. I see these tools as something that can be used to kind of supercharge or superpower what we already know. And so when I think of like an artist, like a digital artist, and I think of Photoshop, in the early days, 20 years ago, Photoshop was, did all these things that were really difficult to do prior to Photoshop. And over time, it introduces new features. And, I think there have been these little moments of panic of like, oh, well, but at the same time, I think that the true artists that are using Photoshop see that as a tool to be used. And ultimately, I think most artists learn how to use Photoshop because that's just part of the modern way of creating that type of art. And same goes for music and everything. So when I look at this, I don't automatically jump to it's going to destroy everyone's jobs. It's going to take over the world. I don't see it. I don't jump to the conclusion that AI is here and it's going to put everybody out of work or that sort of stuff. Do I think that's going to happen to some degree? Yeah, probably, because every big movement in technology with technology does that. It's just the way of the world. But I don't think that it serves anyone to say artificial intelligence does these things really well. We need to stop it so that we can do them well. I think that instead, if I was in that position, I would really just kind of personally, and I realize like I'm not in that position, so it's easy for me to say. It's probably really scary to be in that position, and I can totally empathize with that. But I would do my best in what control I have over my life to really take a look at the tools and see like and be realistic about it. The technology is not going to go away. Like it's just not. The stuff is open sourced. It's going to exist. And if that is the case, if that is true, then how do we harness the capabilities of these technologies to make ourselves even better at what we do? And I totally recognize that's not an easy thing to do. It's it requires learning new skills. It requires really being in a vulnerable place for a while where you realize like maybe what I do is not good enough, but it will be. Just like turn towards it and see what you can learn about it, and I'm pretty certain you can become even better at what you do. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar mind where I am not afraid of these things, because what I think some people do is they get this idea that it's going to replace what human beings do, which is preposterous. And I think this is actually also something that happens from the proponent side, where I hear people who say, oh yeah, don't worry, pretty soon, yes, it can't get fingers right, but it's getting better, and eventually you will not be able to tell the difference, and it will be the same type of creation engine that a human being is, which is frankly ridiculous, because even if you had a machine that could think like a person, it's not a person. There's going to be differences. So I look at both sides, and I'm like, there is so much, the word panic is a good one, there's so much panic over it. And I have people from both sides of it that I engage with regularly, where I just kind of stay neutral. I'm like, well, what do you think, type of thing. And there's people who just pull out flamethrowers, and I'm like, okay, got it. And I just kind of go, all right, I'm not going to disagree with you, because I don't need 4 hours of you screaming at me about why you're right. Even if you are, I don't need it. But I think what I have picked up, and I don't know if you have necessarily detected this, but it is interesting. It's more interesting to me to listen to how people talk about creativity than the tools themselves. Because when I hear people who say things like, well, all artists copy from each other, and I think, well, okay, I sort of get what you mean, but I don't think that's the way to phrase it. That's not really true. Well, maybe it's true, but I'll give you an example. If you heard that somebody had taken one of your songs and changed 3 notes and claimed it was their song, you wouldn't have much respect for that person as a musician, would you? I wouldn't think. I mean, literally copied it and changed a few notes of it. Just is significant enough that you couldn't sue them, I guess. But you wouldn't look at that.
And
go,
when you say copy, just so that I'm clear, when you say copy, like they're copying the recorded song that I have, or they are like copying how I play the song and changing 3 chords.
Well, it's almost like a direct cover with a couple of variations. So let's say a nearly 1-to-1 copy. And this is a pure hypothetical I'm throwing out
totally.
to kind of illustrate a point. But you wouldn't look at that and say, well, that's a great musician who transformed my work. That's somebody who copied my idea. Or wouldn't you? I guess that's a question.
I probably would look at that and be like, all right, that person, obviously copied it. I don't know, it's hard for me because I don't make money off of my music. So, a part of me is kind of like, I don't care, Right.
Whereas if somebody linked you somebody who had covered one of your songs, and it was clearly the bones of it, but they were singing differently and they were using a couple of different instruments and they were kind of, maybe it's a minute longer and they've done something that's I think a lot of people are confusing one thing for another or mixing them together, where yes, I understand if somebody's work is, if somebody puts in a prompt saying, do this in this person's style, and it looks like you could sell it as that person's art.
Totally.
I understand why that artist is upset.
I totally understand that.
Yeah, that's what I'm the comparison. Sorry, because I'm not really. I don't know if I'm constructing the analogy right, but whereas if you say, I don't know, I want to see Wolverine in the style of H.R. Giger. Well, H.R. Giger never drew Wolverine.
Right.
So I don't think he would really care. I think he would look at it and go, why would I ever draw that silly character? But you know. That to me is like, okay, that's just having fun with it. And I think that's where a lot of people just conflate it all into one thing. It's like, no, I think there is a valid discussion to define. And I know defining transformative is tough, but you know what? We have to have tough discussions about things that impact people's lives sometimes. And we should understand that there has to be some type of judgment on what a transformative work is. And it can't be as simple as, well, I took that person's work and I made it orange. No, it's got to be more than that. And I don't know how you define that.
Yeah, I don't know what that line is either. Yeah,
but
I think that's a really big question to be determined in the coming months and years around generative AI, is what actually is transformative, because it does feel like kind of an intangible thing to put your finger on. You know, it's kind of like saying, you know it when you see it. It's like, okay, well.
No, and you're right, because here's an example. If you decided to generate a line of, I don't know, jackets that were artwork around Mickey Mouse, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to sell millions of dollars worth of that if you could recognize Mickey Mouse, because I think there's a company that might be knocking on your door in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So if that's not transformative, you know, that standard should apply to everybody. And I think, it's not the tool. What's interesting to me is the discussion around creativity, and there is a value in making sure that somebody can't just be completely ripped off. But I don't think that often happens. But I do think it's happened. And here's another thing, everybody. This happened before AI, because if you go to Redbubble and TeePublic, you will find people's copyrighted works on T-shirts being sold by not the artists. So this is not new. This is, I think, though, and this again goes back to the social media thing, this might be beneficial in getting us to look at creators and understanding their value more. I'm hoping that. I don't know if that's the result, but if that comes out of it, then it's all work. You know, then all this turmoil is actually beneficial. Is for people to, and again, goes back to the Club Twit model, is this idea that this stuff doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are creators who are putting work into making something, and there should be a value, and there should be a proper respect for that. Yeah. And so, ideally, well, I don't know. I'll let you speak, because now I'm just talking in circles.
I was just going to say, I think that's kind of where I'm at with all of this. There will always be, in my opinion, I could be totally wrong, but I think there will always be value, and perhaps a higher value, placed on a human, like a human's artistic output, or a human's effort. There are certain things that we're going to realize, though, that don't need that don't really need human. It's not creative. Like, okay, let me give you a really great example, because this just happened today. Keywords are the bane of my existence. I hate writing keywords for videos, or a podcast that we do. Like, we get done with Security Now, and I have 500 characters, and I've got to summarize in keywords that are searchable, that represent YouTube searches that people might plug in order to find this episode of Security Now. So I've got to kind of go through the notes and kind of figure out what are 3 or 4 words for each story, a couple of those. And I don't know why, but it just bugs me that I have to do that. I realize, and of course we all do if we're creating content online. Like, it's just the way it is, but I can't help it. I just hate it. So then I feel like that's a perfect opportunity for me to just plug some stuff into an AI, so I use ChatGPT. I also use Claude. With Claude, I was actually able to upload Steve Gibson, the host of Security Now's entire PDF, and just said, give me, less than 500 characters, but but almost exactly 500 characters of keywords derived of video, searchable video keywords that a user of YouTube might plug in to find this podcast. And, it gave me 500 usable characters of keywords. And like, sure, I'm sure there's someone out there whose job it is to create keywords, but I'm telling you, like, this is the prime example. It's like, I don't think AI is putting that keyword guy or that keyword person out of a job. I think AI is saving that person from having to do something that's just really, crummy. So there are certain use cases where AI is going to replace a human. But again, I just subscribe to the belief that frees up that person to do something that's, more skillful or more enjoyable or more something. I don't know what it is, but it frees us up for other things. It frees us up to do more or to do better, or you know what I mean? I keep going back around to this idea of like AI giving us the tools to make ourselves kind of like give ourselves superpowers, because that feels to me to be right. That doesn't remove the human from the experience. That still keeps us in control. We just now have these tools like Photoshop, like I was talking about earlier. If we were in the 80s and someone showed you Photoshop, they'd be like, oh, that's magic what that can do. I mean, there were image editors and stuff like that. But if you were to take like an iMac and take it to the 80s and show them Photoshop, they'd be like magic. And they'd be astounded by what it could do. And I sometimes wonder why we're not thinking about AI from that lens. Like, it's amazing that it can do this stuff. We don't have to be afraid of it. Computers have gotten really good at being computers. So let's harness it. Let's use it for something really amazing.
Oh, no, and I agree, because what it does, even if it doesn't allow you to do something else, it can just by removing tedium, it's good. There was an image
Tedium,
I had.
exactly, yes.
I had an image I took on my phone, and I did it in a vertical format, and it was a nice picture of my dog, and I knew my mom would like it, and I have one of those digital frames that she has that I can remotely, because she's back in New York, so I can remotely throw images onto it. But because I'm extraordinarily OCD about stuff and visual, I can't possibly put a vertical image on a wide screen. So it'll just drive me crazy, even though she would never notice it in a million years. She's, oh, it's a sweet picture, and won't see the giant black boxes on either side that would make me rip my hair out.
That's something that bugs you and I, being in our mid to late 40s.
Right.
Yeah.
So I went to, I opened up Photoshop Beta, and I put the picture in there, and I said, generate the rest of the lawn next to the dog. And I kind of put her off center to at least have the rule of thirds thing happening. And it generated a beautiful backdrop that matched everything else. Now, I could have gone out there with the phone at the same time and taken a picture and stitched it and gone in with the erase tool. And, I can do it, but why would I spend 4 hours on that when this thing can do it? Now, that didn't destroy the image I took. It enhanced it, and it saved me a bunch of hours so that my mom can enjoy a picture of the dog that doesn't look weird. I know, it's only going to look weird to me. So this is almost like it's almost I'm doing it for myself, even though I can't see it. But in my mind, she's enjoying a much better picture than before. And it took, 15 seconds for it to generate it, because I gave it the right prompts and it just filled it in and it looked great.
Yep.
Nobody's going to care.
And moving on.
Right.
Moving on with life.
So that's what I mean about it. I think that the important thing is that the value of the creator themselves, and understanding that there is something unique to human creation. And that part. Also, here's another thing, and I don't hear this get talked about enough. At least, well, maybe it does, and I'm just not hearing it. But let's say you have somebody who has a, cerebral palsy, something like that, and has limited mobility. Wants to paint, can't. Has it painting in their mind, can't get it out because it's simply too physically difficult. Why should that person not be able to generate what's in their mind through this thing and enjoy what's in their head? Who is it harming? Yeah. Again, if they generate something... Well, yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
And on the other side, I do think that though that people should be able to say, I don't want my work as part of this. Now, I don't know what that would take.
Totally agree.
Because there's a lot to be built in there to make that happen. But that I think, at least in my mind, is the reasonable compromise, is to say, you know what? I don't want to be a part of this. You shouldn't have to be part of something you don't want to be part of. That's fine. Past that, it's hysteria. It feels like to me. It's hysteria over as you said, every technological innovation, it happened with the car, it happened with the printing press. It's always happened where people will flip out over something. And you can't fight progress in that way. You can try, you'll end up being miserable and alone.
There's just nothing you can do.
Well, you'll be the Unabomber. I don't think you want to be the Unabomber, so don't be the Unabomber. You know, it's
yeah.
But yeah, the option thing I think would be good.
These tools are open source, you know, in a lot of different directions. I mean, the genie's out of the box, so it's like, how do we live with it now? And I don't think that living with it is a bad thing. But again, I also have to really stress, like, I totally empathize with people who are afraid of the technology, who have careers that are, you know, who have careers and truly feel like their well-being is jeopardized by these tools. I totally get it. It's scary. Change is hard, but I just don't. I don't know that. I don't think that something like AI can be litigated away. Like, I just don't. Or you know, like, I don't think that. I don't think there's any getting rid of those impacts. I do think that over time it gets better. Yes. I think that we need ways to do what you're talking about, to be able to exclude data, to be able to, you know, have some sort of controls over, like I do feel for artists who have a very specific art style, and then, you know, the AI is able to replicate it and create, you know, in their style. Do I feel like that shouldn't be possible whatsoever? I don't know. I kind of feel like jury's still out, because again, I go back to, yeah, but you know, the artist is always going to win. Like, you're the artist. You're the artist that people know is the authentic, real, you know, person creating that art. And I just have to believe that that will always be more valuable. Because here's another thing that I think is really interesting about AI. When it comes to naming things, and we've even, you know, played around with this with the AI show, got to come up with a title. So everybody's like, oh, what about using AI to come up with a title for your AI show? And so I use, you know, a ChatGPT or whatever, and come up with, in a matter of seconds, come up with 50 names for an AI podcast. And tell me if this is you. When I see a list that was just generated and it's 50 of them that came really easily, my immediate kind of like emotional response to that, no matter how good they are, is that they're not good. It's like I look at that list and I'm like, that was far too easy. They're not good. Now, what I would like to do is take that list, go back in time, and give it to someone, have someone give it to someone, and have that person, you know, maybe it's an intern or maybe it's another employee here at Twit or whatever, come up to me and be like, hey, you know, I spent last night thinking about your new AI show, and I came up with 50 titles that, you know, you can use them, you can just throw them away, but here's 50 titles for your AI show. I hope this is helpful. I guarantee you I'd look at that list and I'd be like, man, these are some really great titles. But, well, you know, but because it comes from a machine, I have a harder time doing that. And I'm sure that I'm not alone on this.
No, and some of that I think is a lot of people have pointed out, a byproduct of the fact that these machines are all kind of, they aren't intuitive, they aren't really inventive. What they're doing is they're remixing.
Yeah, it's
totally
it's remixed.
So there is always going to be the randomness that's going to be missing from that. That's why when, and we're not going to start on this too far because we'll be here for 2 hours, but this idea that people are like, well, one day they'll replace the human brain with a machine brain. I'm like, no, they won't, because it's still not a human brain in a human body. And the traumas and the things that can be experienced by a biological body cannot be replicated in a machine body. It can be similar, but it will never be the same. That's not to say it's worse or better necessarily, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And this is an even 50 generations back version of that, where it's, well, there's only as much as these things suck in, that still is a limited data set compared to what one person who's walking along thinking about your show and stubs their toe and says whatever expletive, and then thinks about that and goes, oh, you know what? Expletive AI. That's a great show title. That only happened because there was a random event, right? That machine's not going to stub its toe. I mean, maybe if it fries a transistor or something, and that would be interesting to see what the output would be. But that level of random creation, intuition, whatever, is not something that a machine can do. It can try, but it can't really do it because it's not sentient. It's not alive. That's why AI is such a terrible term for it, because people think, oh, it's a Terminator walking around, or, you know, some kind of living Johnny Five walking around. No, it's not. It's not that. And so, and part of this, the stuff we're talking about in terms of the panic and everything, part of that is because the anthropomorphization, there we go, problem, what AI has been pop culture assimilated to be. Ooh, assimilation. Now it's the Borg. See, AI. It's all of that stuff that makes people react in a certain way without really thinking about, because I think you're right. I actually much agree that you're not going to replace people. Those creators are still valuable. I think we agree too on the choice thing is I also wouldn't want somebody to take a drawing of mine and just replace, like, if it's a superhero one, and just put swastikas on the center of it and then sell it. I'd be like, no, wait, I'm sorry.
Of course not.
And that's where there has to be some check, or like the SAG-AFTRA stuff where they came out and said, yeah, we just want to have your likeness forever and we'll just use that. So we're going to pay you once. That's the other side of it where it's like, okay, there has to be some recognition that there is something valuable about what creators bring to this stuff. Doesn't mean you close the door. It means you recognize that different people walk through different doors. Okay, this analogy is falling apart, but that there has to be a balanced idea to this stuff, that it has to be recognized as a tool, and just like a hammer, you can build a house, you can kill somebody. And so,
I mean, I do think that there is something to be caution. There is room for caution when it comes to the fact that some people with a lot of influence and a lot of money and put in a position of power can make, can make really bad choices as well. And
yes.
So
keeping a leash on the tool and not just killing it outright is maybe the better approach. You can't say it can't exist, but let's make sure it exists in the most beneficial way for everybody
that's
possible.
I think, yeah, absolutely. That's the point. Is I think it absolutely needs guardrails. Again, but having said that, like, how do you put guardrails on something that's like out there in open source, and, like, you know what I mean? Like, can be a million different things.
Well, I mean, you can't control everything. That's life in general, but you can try to. Just like everything. I mean, you can't control all the bad things that can happen to people, but what you try to do is, put a seatbelt in a car. Oh, let's make murder illegal because that would stop that. You know, things like that where you try to, without going crazy and saying, okay, you have to stay in a little metal box for your entire life in a secure environment so that nothing can ever harm you. You can't do that either. But there are things that are reasonable that that you can do to try to make it as equitable and fair as possible.
Yeah,
and you're going to accept that some people will go outside of that, just like people will take, I don't know, medication that's benevolent when taken properly, and they'll overdose on it. You can't then say there's no medication. You say, well, you try.
Right.
You can't do it all.
Yeah, good.
And I think that's where it gets lost in again, on both sides, to make sure I'm fair about it. The people who think it's the destruction of the universe and the people who think it's, the savior of the future. Both of those angles, to me, like most extremist positions, typically are wrong. And the thing is, there has to be a moderate, might be the wrong word for it, but there has to be a considered approach to it that neither stops it nor lets it just run when there's every possibility it'll burn down a house it runs into. Again, terrible analogy, but I think it's understood what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, I understand.
And on that note, that there is probably a middle path that will be good for everybody. Let's end on a positive note, if we can.
Okay, fine.
Well, I'm being respectful of your time, because we could sit here all night and I could just go on and on and on, and you'd fall asleep, and so would the audience. Or we could go into the dark ages of the internet and how terrible things could be, but let's not do that either, because that's no fun. So is there anything else? I said this in the last segment. I doubt it's changed because it's only been about 40 minutes later or so. Anything that's, I should say, okay, so people can go to twit.tv. They can see you on Tech News Weekly every week, or every week you're not on vacation or, in the office.
Yeah. Pretty
much. If
there
you're a member of Club, now the AI show is a Club Twit show.
Yeah, I mean, the AI show that I'm working on is a Club Twitch show, and the plan is, if and when we get it to a certain point, as I feel like is the case with a lot of what starts in the club, when it gets to enough kind of listeners and has enough energy around it, and they feel they can break it out of the club, then they would do that at some point. But yes, absolutely would start in the club. If you go to twit.tv/clubtwit, you can get all the information as far as the club is concerned. But that would give you access to this show, as well as, we have a couple of other shows that we do in the club as well. Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, Home Theater Geeks. Actually, there's a lot happening in the club now. It's been scaling over the last couple of years. Aunt Pruitt has been really busy with it and doing an amazing job kind of growing it. So.
But the nice part is you can go and you can sample the free shows and get an idea. And then if you want more, you can subscribe and you get access to a whole bunch more stuff, which like I said, I think that's a great model. So,
yeah.
But yeah, you can find Jason's work over at twit.tv. You can go to yellowgoldmusic.com.
Hey.
Got it, finally.
Yeah, there you
go. To listen to Jason's music, which is really good, and I would recommend it.
Yeah.
And I would actually say, I don't know when you'll have time to do anything like this, but I would certainly not be averse to purchasing a full album of songs like the most recent one that's an electronic-based one, because I thought it was very good.
Well, so I do have some music in the works right now. I have
a scoop. I've got a scoop.
Well, actually, since this episode releases a week later, I think by the time this episode is released, I have been doing a side project with a friend of mine called Wall, Wall. And it's electronic music focused. It's like industrial dance along with some like techno influence. I do vocals on it. We did an EP called This Here Life. So if you go onto Spotify at the time of this podcast, you can search for Wall, This Here Life, and you'll find a 4-song EP that we're really proud of. That's coming out. And then I also have an EP that I'm working on for Yellow Gold. It's not as electronic focused as the song you're talking about. You're talking about Freeform. But it's definitely has its own vibe. And that's coming out, I don't know when, probably in the coming next month or two.
And I think that's even better. Right? There's lots of people I know who do different types of music so that's great. Certainly, the more variety, the better. So I will actually link. So I will save people the trouble of even having to go to Google or whatever your search engine is. I will put the link to this Life EP in the show notes. I have it noted, so I will make sure that's in there. Or you can search for it if you really don't like clicking on show notes. I understand.
This Here Life, yeah.
This Here Life. Oh, see, I got to correct it. Hold on.
It's all good.
H-E-R-E, Life.
That's right.
Well, Jason, this was a blast. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, because I know you got a ton of stuff going on with Twit, so I really appreciate everybody whenever they come. I've never done a bad one of these, not meaning I'm any good, but meaning that I've never had a bad time.
Right.
Everybody I've had on.
Oh, boy, I wish that hadn't happened. Yeah, no, this is a lot of fun, Joe. Thank you. This is a lot of fun hanging out with you and getting to talk about all sorts of things.
Well, as I tell everybody, my door is always open, so at some point in the future, if you are massively bored, then we can do something like this again.
Sweet.
But for now, I will remind people, go over to twit.tv, go to yellowgoldmusic.com, and if you want to hear our back catalog, you can go over to ozonenightmare.com and click the podcast link, and then there's an archive where you can listen to our older stuff. So feel free to let me know, hey, you enjoyed our conversation, and I, as always, will pass along any comments to Jason. But you can reach Jason, is it jason@twit.tv?
That's it. Yep.
So if you want to email Jason directly and cut me completely out of it, I understand. Go for it. You can do that. Otherwise, thank you for stopping by and listening to Jason say really informative things and me babble on for far too long. And we will see you on the next episode of Ozone Late Night.
Bye.
Visit ozonenightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes, browse through our back catalog, or to find links to support the show. Follow @Ozone Nightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 280 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us at ozonenightmare@gmail.com. Music for Ozone Late Night is provided by Ogre. Visit ogresounds.bandcamp.com to hear and purchase his fantastic selection of music.